Hey, how you doing? And welcome back to another video on the channel. So it's the wildcard team for Game Week 8. I did release one before the end of Game Week 7, but that did have Salah and Haaland in it. This one just has Haaland in it, and I have created my own charts as well. So even if you're not wildcarding, you're just looking for free transfers, it'll hopefully give you something interesting to look at and help you inform with your free transfer decisions. If it does, and you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. Like I say, I make my own charts and I have a small channel that's trying to grow. So if you can help me continue to do so, it would be really appreciated. Let's take a look at the team. So first of all, I'm going to say shout out to Fantasy Football Hub. This team came in at 94% rated, which is good. It's not 100% like we've had in the past, but anything in the mid 90s is really solid. Now, we have to take into consideration that the charts involve information or include information that have already happened. And part of FPL is trying to use that information to predict what's going to happen in the future. So you have to combine what's already happened with the good fixtures and making some solid predictions. So that's probably why it's not 100% rated or higher in the 90s. Now, the team value is 100.3 million. I do try and keep it within a 100 million budget, but there are players here that you will already own, like a Semenyo, like a Haaland, that this value is if you are buying that team from scratch. So if you already own those players, you can easily afford it the rest of the team. So in goal, I've gone for David Raya. Now, he's always been the goalkeeper, it seems, for the last few weeks, and I'm not 100% keen on David Raya. Now, the main reason that I'm questioning that is because he's gone up to 5.7 million. So he's not that far away from the other Arsenal defenders, some of the Arsenal defenders now. So there is the possibility that you get in a cheaper goalkeeper, save a bit of money from Raya, and then double up in actual Arsenal defenders rather than having a Raya and a Gabriel. So I don't dislike that option. As we can see from the chart, anyone below this line is expected to concede less than one goal per 90. So I've used per 90 minutes for the goalkeepers because goalkeepers tend to play 90 minutes compared to outfield players. And when we look below that line, there's not a huge selection. Now, it is important to keep in mind with this chart is that it doesn't start from zero for expected goals conceded per 90. It starts from about zero point 0.6. So we can see Raya here expected to concede about zero point 0.6 goals per game. So that is really good. It's just there's no goalkeeper better, which is why we started the chat here. I actually don't dislike a Nick Pope. I think he's a really good option. Now, not because he's keeping loads of clean sheets, because I actually don't think Newcastle can keep that going, can sustain that in the long term. But I think from an expected goals point of view, it does give good underlying data as to a solid defence. And therefore, Nick Pope at 5.1 million, you could get him instead of Raya and then look at getting a Timber or a Calafiori into your defence. And feel free to pause these charts at any point because sometimes there's a lot to look at. And if you wanted to pause and just have a look at some of the players you're interested in, feel free to do so. So into defence, and I'm going to highlight Mukiele here, and I did talk about him in the previous wildcard video as well. And he's someone that is really being overlooked, I think, in terms of promoted side at one of their defenders. A lot of people are looking at Burnley defenders and Leeds defenders, and we do have a Burnley defender in here as well. But I think Mukiele at 2.2% owned, averaging over 12 defensive contributions per game, he's just awesome. And his fixtures don't look too difficult in the next six. The Wolves and Everton games are both at home. And it's quite good because you'd rather have Wolves and Everton at home and Chelsea and Arsenal away rather than play Chelsea and Arsenal at home and they're still a difficult fixture and then have to go away to the other teams. So I think the fixtures are the right way round in that respect. And you can just bench him for the fixtures that you don't want him for because he's someone who is only 4 million. So you're not feeling like you've got a load of value on the bench. But even with Chelsea and Arsenal away, that's where he'll get his defensive contributions. So even if you did want to play him there and just hope that he gets 4 points, say, I don't think it's the worst decision in the world. This defense also has a three back, so I've gone for a three back here. I know a lot of people are considering a five back in defense, myself included. I played it in Game Week 7 and did really well. But I do think having a team like this does allow balance and strength elsewhere rather than just committing fully to the defense. So I've gone for Gabriel as my Arsenal defender and Dan Burn as my Newcastle defender. If I did have Pope in goal on this team, I wouldn't have Dan Burn as well. I would have Jurriën Timber. Think that does make it a little bit more expensive because Timber is 5.9 million and Pope is 5.1. So that means I'd save zero point 0.6 in the goalkeeper and I'd need to find zero point 0.8 in the defence. So I wanted to keep the price of the team closer to 100 million. You can just stick in all the most expensive best players and say, here's an amazing team. But if it's not realistic, I don't really see the point. Senesi has gone up to 5 million. I think he's still a good pick. I wouldn't expect him to get six defensive contribution, hit the defensive contributions 6 times in the next 7 games. The law of averages states that's probably going to drop down a little bit. But I still think he's a great choice, and Bournemouth probably are that team who are going to finish about 6th or 7th this season. They don't have European football to distract them, and he's not going to get rotated anytime soon. So when we take a look at the chart, I tried to balance sort of the attacking defenders with the defending defenders. So which defenders can get points on both sides of the ball. Here we can see the three most attacking defenders, Calafiori, Munoz, and Jurriën Timber. Now, they are head and shoulders above everyone else in terms of expected goal involvements. Doesn't mean they're the best defenders because they're not getting a lot of defensive contributions. So if you wanted to get them in, they're not going to get you those points that are sort of ticking along, like the defensive contribution players who are getting you points more consistently. But when these guys do get you points, they'll probably get you a lot. Now, in terms of the defenders in my squad for this video, we can see they're highlighted here. And Mukiele and Senesi are just clear picks, I think, for defensive contributions. They're ahead of everyone else. Now, Dan Burn, Ekdal, and Gabriel, they're kind of close to 10 defensive contributions per game. Ekdal is at least. But in terms of attacking threat, I think it's something that they don't necessarily have as clear on a chart. But what you have to bear in mind is they'll get their goals from corners. It's not like they're getting into the box in possession, like Jurriën Timber say, who might have the ball passed across him into a good scoring opportunity. It's really hard to get good expected goal involvements from corners because there's so many players in there. How can you single out one player who's more likely to score than another? Very easily. So I would bear in mind that it's quite difficult to predict that sort of thing. And we know that Gabriel, especially, has that attacking threat that doesn't necessarily show up on this chart. I think if you were looking for defenders who offer both, anyone in the red rectangle here is pretty good. What you have to keep in mind is that when you try and cover both the defenders who are getting attacking and defensive contributions, you might miss out on both. There's a chance that they don't quite hit 10 defensive contributions and they're not going to get you 10 goals a season. So, are you going to get any? Should you commit to either attacking defenders or defensive defenders and just sort of go with those points? If you were looking at getting both, I think someone like an Anderson or a Chalobah is pretty good. If Chalobah can stay fit and stay in the lineup when is fit, I think he's a really good option. Chelsea's fixtures look good. So into midfield, and I'm going to highlight Bukayo Saka. If you're on a wild card, I really like him as a pick. Free transfer, not so much, because you're probably going to have to make a couple of transfers in the midfield to get him in. Maybe have triple Arsenal already, and you'd have to sell Gyökeres, say, in order to fund Saka. So it depends on your transfer situations. But if you were umming and ahhing about whether you wanted to get Saka in, now would probably be the time to do it. Only 10% owned, some really good fixtures, especially in the next four. And again, it's what you're predicting he's going to happen because he's been injured this season. He's not got the masses of data that other players might have. But he's still under 10 million, or at least he was at time of recording. I think he's a great pick. Now, the rest of the midfield, players who have been really efficient this season, and we can see on the chart Enzo Fernandez, Sarr, and Semenyo are all ranking really well for expected goal involvements. They're only really second to Mbumo and Bruno Fernandes. And Bruno Fernandes has had some penalties. So again, it's like what we're saying with Gabriel. If Gabriel's not going to take your penalties for Arsenal, right? So his expected goal involvements aren't as clear. Whereas Bruno Fernandes is probably overinflated because of that and not a true reflection because Man United aren't going to get penalties every game. So the three midfielders I've got in this team, I think are really good. And you might be asking, where is Saka and Josh King in here? Well, they didn't quite fit the data. Josh King was too cheap, and Saka's not getting 80 minutes per game. So I've added them into this chart here, and we can see Saka currently is ranking just below the three midfielders we've spoken about already. Now, that is really good. I think he's potentially going to do well in the next few weeks. And if you imagine what this chart would look like in 4 weeks when Saka's had his good fixtures, you think his expected goal involvements would go up significantly if he's getting the minutes. So again, it's an example of what we spoke about at the start, where the data is great, but it doesn't give you the full picture. If you were just going on data right now, you'd maybe think Saka's not worth it. But combined with the fixtures and the knowledge that he's not played as much as everyone else, I think really does play into it. Josh King, he just looks like he's in the middle of everything here. But at 4.5 million, he's so much cheaper than the options around him. You look at the players close to him, like a Reinders, a John McGinn, Zuba Mendy's there. He's not a million miles off players like Cunha, Gibbs White, and Gakpo. And I think that's something that does need to be taken into account if you're looking to save money. He's not doing too much worse than those players. One area where this midfield is lacking is defensive contributions. So I do think it's more difficult for midfielders to get defensive contributions. Someone like a Caicedo is really good on the far right of the chart there. And if you were looking to save money, I don't hate an Enzo to a Caicedo, and you keep that Chelsea midfielder. But I do think you just need to keep in mind that Enzo Fernandez is a lot more attacking. So up front we go, and I've gone for three forwards here. Quite an unpopular opinion at the moment, and I'm not too sure how I feel about it myself because in my own team, I've been benching João Pedro and Evan Nielsen the last couple of weeks and just starting Haaland and going for four at the back or a five at the back and doing quite well. So I have, considered that in this selection, and I think we're going to talk about the strengths of having three forwards a little bit later on. But highlighting Jared Bowen, who scored 3 goals in 7 games already, I think he's good. He's been scoring in an underperforming West Ham side. So if you can get him in now on a free transfer or a wild card with the next 5 fixtures, I think he's a really good 7.2% owned. He's a differential and he's someone that could get you those extra points to climb up your mini league. Haaland is a must have, really. You're not going to see anyone who's going to advise you not to bring Haaland in. He's Whether he's going to keep it going in the long term remains to be seen, but in the short term, especially with the lack of expensive options that are out there in FPL, you can probably afford it and you just might as well. There's no point fighting the obvious. When we take a look at the chart for expected goal involvements and actual goal contributions, we can see that Haaland is just head and shoulders above everybody else. And it's not even that he's overperforming his expected goal involvements. He's getting about eight and is expected to get eight. So it's something that is sustainable. You take a João Pedro, however, and you look at his goal contributions at five, and his expected goal involvements is less than two. That's something where you think, hang on a minute, is he going to be able to keep that going long term? Probably not. Chelsea do have those good fixtures. If you did want to swap a João Pedro to a Jared Bowen and keep two up front with a cheaper forward, I think that is a good time to do it. Whether I'd use a free transfer on it, probably wouldn't, just because, like I say, Chelsea have good fixtures. West Ham, you know, are they going to be that much better in the short term? It kind of remains to be seen. But I think as a front three, you can't find much better. If you did want to save some money, you could drop down to a Voltamada from a João Pedro. I do quite like that. If you had a bit more money in the bank, you could go for Gyökeres as well. But then that does take you from a third Arsenal player. So maybe you want that flexibility for the midfield and the defence. So overall, I do think the strengths, and we talked about this in a previous video, it is a popular time to wildcard. Now, why is that a strength of this team? Well, it means that you can keep up with the majority of FPL managers in terms of what they are doing, if that's your style of management. Also means that everybody else has kind of used their wildcard already. There's not many people who are going to still have their wildcard after this game week. And what that means is that you currently now have more flexibility than someone who's already used their wildcard. Say I used mine, I think in game week 6. I can't make as many changes to my team now that you can if you've still got your wildcard. So if you did still have it, I think it does give you an advantage just to keep up with the rest of the players, as well as have some flexibility for the future. And there's also good price points. Now, what I mean with that is players like Saka, you could, if he doesn't work out in the next 4 weeks, sell him to pretty much anybody else other than Palmer, unless you've got a bit more transfer funds, or a Salah. And the same with João Pedro and Jared Bowen. Let's say you look at this team and you think, I don't really like João Pedro in my team anymore. I want a cheaper forward. Quite easy to go for a cheaper forward unless it's looking for, someone who's more expensive. But then you can save that money and invest in the defense. If you didn't want 4 million defenders, you could upgrade that, or maybe you upgrade a Josh King to a bit more of a more expensive forward there. So midfielder there. So the weaknesses for me is that not even no triple Liverpool, there's no Liverpool at all. So when considering that, it might not look like a big deal right now because Liverpool aren't playing very well. However, I would think of a plan, a strategy to get in Liverpool if needed. How could you get Van Dijk in your team? How could you get Salah or a Gakpo in your team if you wanted them, right? Because you might think, oh, I don't want them right now. But in 5 weeks, if you did, which players would you sacrifice, and just have that backup plan in your head. There's also three forwards here. Now, again, me personally, I've been going with one, maybe two strikers in FPL in recent times. The meta or the good way of playing or the maximum way of playing at the moment is probably to have 4 or 5 defenders. But again, is that going to be the strongest way to play FPL in the next 5 weeks? Someone like a Senesi could really drop down for his getting 10 defensive contributions per game. That average is hard to keep. So, what if that does happen and players start thinking he's not worth it? At least now with three forwards, you've got those options that you don't need to use free transfers in. You've got quite a strong defense, midfield, and attack, and therefore you can rotate as you see fit. And it's only going to take one or two free transfers just to drop down one of these three strikers and upgrade a defender. So yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know if you're wildcarding yourself. Let me know if you've got any questions or any charts you'd like to see. It's always good to hear your points of view. And if you are still here at this point in the video, please do subscribe. Honestly, the support for a small channel is amazing. And I really do appreciate it. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and I will see you in the next one.